The name of the stream is talking about serial murder while playing with vampires. The original name of the stream was talking about serial killers, but Twitch was like, no, 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 you can't call it that. But serial murder is okay. Apparently it had issue with the term killers. So, whatever. Serial murder, here it is. Well, hello everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending upon whenever you are watching this. Welcome to the Big Brain Relax and Learn. And over the next couple of weeks, we will be discussing topics, as we always do, while I play a game that is loosely related to the topic at hand. And this week's topic, and for the weeks following, will be about serial killers, or serial murder, or however you want to refer to them. We will be talking about serial killers and the theories behind them, what motivates them, what kind of victims do they choose, how do we hunt them down, all of those topics and more. And tonight, specifically, however, will act as sort of an intro for you. We will overview some of the myths and misconceptions of serial killers and discuss society's obsession with them while playing the, I don't know if it was panned or successful, but Vampyr. Because, we're going to be talking about myths and monsters and serial killers, and vampires kind of fit that. So join me, won't you, while we talk about serial killers and I try to navigate the horrible world it is being a vampire. And I felt like this was an appropriate drink while playing a game about vampires and talking about serial killers. It's fruit juice. It's not wine. To get started, should we start a new game, or should I start? You know what? We are going to start a new game because I like the way this game starts, and I think it's sort of relevant to the topic at hand. So we're going to start the new game. We're going to let the little intro sequence play, and then I'm going to start talking. So here we go. Let's let this intro play.
Under crown of stone, 8 voracious beasts born from 8 restless nights, 4 nails piercing the flesh of the sinner, 1 prayer for the summoned called by this song. 'Tis perhaps the countdown to oblivion for the once proud city of London. 'Tis perchance her inhabitants' last dance alone to face death and pestilence. Confronted by the eerie and unknown, mortals became desperate for answers. A flock's flight makes for an omen, the falling of a star a dire presage. Turning to priests for interpretation when there was no reason to be found. When religion failed, men turned to science. I saw them build such vain cities, crafting machines made for endless war. New questions flourished as old answers withered. What is darkness but lurking sun? What is war but enslaved stone? What is glass but tortured sand? What is song but a call to arms? What is hate but jilted love? What is life but death pending?
All right, and we are in a pile of dead bodies, and our protagonist awakes. Give him a second. He'll come here. This is kind of why I wanted to do the intro, primarily because of this intro scene. Serial killers are a very mysterious lot, I guess. And pretty much everything that we think we know about them is kind of shaded by misinformation and myth and stories and more so what the media shares and what movies and books and films and every different kind of media that's out there kind of shades our view of what serial killers are. I mean, even when they first, I shouldn't say when they first came about, but when they were kind of first brought to the public's attention, which was in the early 80s, right? 1981 specifically there was a major serial killer in the Atlanta, Georgia area by the name of Wayne Williams. who caught the country by storm. And ever since then, it's kind of just been something that the public has been focused on. And surrounding the idea of the serial killer is plenty of myth. One of which is kind of like what we're witnessing right now, right? You have this individual, this, first of all, white male, right? Individual who stalks alone at night, and he hunts his prey, and he's, well-to-do and intelligent, but he is driven by this unknown craving for death and blood. And as you can see, as he walks through the streets at night, he spots his target. Her heart glowing. He can taste the blood, the what's it called, the blood rage, or it's strong with him. And then he can't help himself. He goes up, and eventually, it's going to get there. Give it a second. Seems normal. Seems like a normal everyday guy. And then all of a sudden, he turns. And he kills his prey. And that's kind of like, serial killers kind of go along the same path. Right, what we presume to know about them essentially follows along this same kind of path, just in the scene that we just saw, right? And then when the killing is done, they're finally it's like a release, almost sexual in nature, right? Well, a lot of that is myth and misinformation. It's again, for the most part, what we think we know comes from media. And it can be the media overreacting. It can be artistic license, if you will, right? Think about all of the various novels out there, like serial novels out there, that are usually follow some sort of serial killer, right? Silence of the Lambs, right? Hannibal Lecter. Everybody knows Hannibal Lecter, prolific serial killer, right? And he's kind of what you picture when you think of a serial killer. But that is not the general rule of thumb, right? If you were to look at all of the kind of presumptions, by the way, this was his sister, I believe, that he killed, accidentally in his bloodlust. However, you killed her, you beast, you done killed her. When it comes to, we're gonna have to run now for a second. Oh, and see, now we're being hunted, much like the serial killers that we will be studying over the next couple of days. But as we run, right, we're going to run down this street to avoid being shot again. After 1981, Wayne Williams, you started seeing kind of like not a resurgence, because resurgence would indicate that it happened before. And there's guns there. There's guns there. Stop! Get away from the guns. Get away from the guns. There was kind of what appeared to be a growth in the number of serial killers, or at least recorded serial killers. Because here's the thing, serial killers have been around for, pretty much as long as killing has been around, serial killers have been around. Ooh, I'm gonna have to kill a guy. Ha, ha, ha. And see, now we're getting into a different typology of serial. This is now getting into kind of what would be considered a mass murder, actually, as well. Come on. Bite me. Bite me. Oop. Oh, he stabbed me. I killed him. And then he apologizes to him. Jesus. Oh, he threw dust at me. Stop shooting me. Please. Alright. Back to the topic at hand. After 1981's Wayne Williams affair, right, you had this growth of serial killers, and all of a sudden it seemed like they started coming out of the woodwork, right? So it became kind of this epidemic of serial killing in the U.S., or at least a perceived epidemic, right? And it's kind of interesting because in response to that, the FBI testified in front of Congress. Let me find the page in my book. By the way, if you would like to follow along with the class, This is the book that I am reading, or I am using. Serial Murders and Their Victims by Eric W. Hickey. This is the book for the class that I'm teaching. And it's actually a really interesting read. And sometimes I need to stop before bed because it's going to give me nightmares. There are some stories in here, man. Okay, 1984, so 3 years after Wayne Williams. The FBI testified in front of Congress, and they made a claim that there were, according to new accounts of the hearing, as many as 5,000 people per year were believed to be killed by serial murders. That is a ridiculous number. 5,000 people per year were killed by serial killers. There's about 15,000 murders in the U.S. I may be lying about that. Yes, there are about, every year, 15,000 people murdered in the U.S. And the FBI was saying a full third of them were killed by serial murderers. Nobody knows where they got that number from, because it wasn't based in any sort of fact. However, they got what they desired out of tossing that number to Congress, and that was lots of monies. Because Congress has this thing that when they start to freak out, they just throw money at a problem until it goes away. Except universal health care. However, when it comes to serial killing, communism, or drugs, they throw as much money at it as possible. And as a result of that FBI testimony, the FBI received a buttload of funding in order to combat this new pandemic that was serial killers. And they started studying it to a certain degree. They started learning about it, and it was after that you saw this kind of explosion of serial murder throughout the country. Now, there's kind of two connections that you can make. The first kind of correlation you can make to that is that, yes, there was a new breed of criminal out there, and it wasn't until Wayne Williams that we started finding them. Or it's the fact that now, due to the fact that there were new investigative techniques out there, a type of killer that has always been present was now finally being connected to their crimes. I personally am a believer of the latter, the one where now the FBI actually kind of knew what to look for. What made the public believe that there were more serial killers out there than actually were, except besides the FBI saying, hey, 5,000 murders per year were committed by serial killers, which again is not the case. It's the fact that it's just when a serial murder happens, right? It's covered nationally in the news, and so everybody sees it, and everybody thinks it's this pandemic, right? So now we have found ourselves in the house of a woman, right, who is dead. I don't know why, but we're going to steal her alcohol. Daddy needs a drink. However, out of this kind of fury of information that was thrown at the public with regards to serial killers, right, there has kind of developed this basic stereotype of serial killer while this plays in the background. Let's see. Intelligent, insane, white males that act alone, travel across the country, murdering their victims by strangulation, beating, or stabbing. They only kill women, right? They are sexually abused as children. They can't help themselves, and they secretly all want to be caught. That's kind of the stereotype that pops up in our head. But that stereotype, when combined with what we know about serial killers today, right? Based upon all of the research that's been collected over, the past 40, 50 years or so, we know that serial killers, let's just go through the list. Are they intelligent? Most of them are actually average intelligence. General educational level for most serial killers is a high school diploma. That's it. Are they insane? Actually, only 2 to 4% of all serial killers can be legally defined as insane. Are they all white? Actually, only about 50% of them are white. The other 50%, give or take a couple percentage points, are black, actually. They are male. 1 of every 6 serial killers is a female. And arguably, they're more dangerous than the males. Do they act alone? About a quarter of them all have an accomplice. Travel vast expanses. The vast majority of serial killers are what are known as local serial killers. There are three categories: local, in place, and traveling. We'll get to that in another lesson. But the vast majority of them generally stay within a certain geographic location. They only kill women. The victim choice can vary widely. All of them have been sexually abused as a child. That's a fallacy, actually. A good portion of them usually have some sort of perceived childhood trauma, and I say perceived childhood trauma, that usually it results in feelings of abandonment. They can't help themselves. A lot of them know exactly what they're doing and actively choose to do it and choose the time and place to do it. And then, of course, most want to be caught. That's actually very rare. Now, I should start with, ooh, look at this guy. Jeez, this is an awful house that we have found ourselves in. I should kind of start with the fact that serial killers, first of all, are extremely rare. Okay? The numbers that I threw out before that the FBI testified to Congress was a blatant lie, right? They said 5,000 people per year were murdered by serial killers. All right? It actually turns out to be the more realistic figure is only about 1 to 2% of all murder cases can be linked to a serial killer. And then, if you really want to get down to it, right, only about 2 to 4% of those are insane. That is an extremely small amount of serial killers, of people in the country, right? So 15,000 murders per year, give or take, which is an extremely high murder rate for a civilized country. I keep bumping my mic. I apologize. And then you only have about 1 to 2% of those being victims of serial murder. So, I don't know, math, it's much smaller than 5,000 per year. So let's take a couple questions here. Do any of them have a superiority complex? Some of them do, usually those with psychopathic traits, which we will get into in probably next week. We'll talk about psychopathy and sociopathy and all of those traits. But superior narcissism is one of those traits. Let's see, notepad, blood diary. Oh, bloody diary. I thought it was the blood diary. Now we're going to do something that can be kind of, I guess, labeled as insane. But while we talk about it, we can also, when we talk about serial murder, in the same breath, we also have to mention two other types of multiple murder, all right? So you have serial murder, right, which can loosely be defined as, and generally this is the kind of conventional definition that most people take, is any offender that kills over time, right? That's generally what serial murder is. But then you can also take another category of multiple murder and label it as mass murder, which is where you have multiple victims, but all at one time, right? And he can't live with himself with what he's done and what he's become. Because I guess he identifies that he is a vampire now. Anywho. Hello, I've interrupted this video because I'm one of those guys who's going to ask you to like and subscribe and ring the bell and comment and all of that because it helps the channel and it helps me continue to pull off these streams once a week because it's what I like to do and I hope you like it as well. So please like, subscribe, all of that. Follow me over on Twitch. And back to the lecture. Mass murder. By legal definition is, I believe, when there are at least 2 victims in one occurrence, right? So multiple victims in one spot, one offense. Serial murder is multiple victims spread out over time. And then you have what can sometimes be called a spree murder. And when I learned about this subject way back when I was an undergrad, we're talking about like 10 years ago, spree murder was its own distinct thing. However, the professionals now believe that spree murder should just kind of be lumped into serial killers because it's not mass murder where it all happens at one time. It's spread out over a couple days as opposed to maybe weeks or years like some serial killers, like the prolific serial killers do, which is also another kind of myth about serial killers, that they operate for long periods of time and they have dozens and dozens and dozens of victims. The average victim count is like 4. Like, I mean, that's still a lot of dead people, right? Like, 4 is a small number if you're talking about dollars, but when you're talking about murder victims, it's a lot. Free murder is not a term that is really thrown around all that much anymore. Mass murder, however, is distinct from serial murder. And in fact, the individuals that commit mass murder are very different from the individuals that would commit serial murder. Serial murder is a very different individual from the mass murderer. Mass murderers, because this is not the subject for the class, however, because it's sort of interesting, usually result from some sort of break. Right? There is like a last straw that causes them to go off. And a vast majority of them usually involve some sort of domestic homicide. So the killing of like a partner or a family member. And sometimes the mass murder is what is known as bifurcated, which is where you start the murders one place, usually in a private residence, like the home, and then you take it to a public place and you commit the rest of the mass murders. However, what's interesting is that there is a technical definition of serial murder. Like I said, the kind of conventional definition is one who murders multiple people over a period of time. However, the technical definition, in 2008, the FBI had a symposium, right, in order to try to better define serial murder so that they know what to look for and how to investigate it. And also kind of define a point at which they can get involved in the investigations. So the FBI in 2008 defined serial murder, and here it is. This is the exact definition. Unlawful killing of 2 or more victims by the same offender in separate events. Now, they actually took this because what they were working from prior to that definition and that symposium was 4 or more victims. So there comes this kind of like frustrating part of maybe a local police force that discovers, has an unsolved murder, and then there's another one, and the detectives are like, we think this is the same guy. Maybe we have a serial murderer on our hands. Let's call the FBI. And the FBI is like, nope, you need 2 more bodies. So they kind of reduced it. They said, nope, 2, if you can link 2 bodies to the same person, that's a serial murder, by strictest definition. Now, what did that do? That actually, since 2008, you saw kind of like another jump in serial murder. And again, it's because of the change in definition. All of a sudden, it lumped in a whole bunch of other killers who maybe wouldn't traditionally be known as serial killers, but now by definition are serial killers. And that actually affects some of the numbers and typologies out there with regards to serial killers. Hey, I now have a stake. I'm going to stake you. Even though I'm a vampire, I'm going to stake you. Oh, he's got a gun. Ah, yeah, see? And now I can dodge like a ghost. All right, come at me, bro. Come on. Come at me, bro. Come at me, bro. Ow. And now I will eat him. Ooh, there's a bunch of them down there. Nope. They're burning me. Okay, so hold on, guys. Let me focus on this combat for a second. I can eat him too. And then I can do this. Yes. Yes. That would be horrifying, by the way. Imagine like this guy doing this coming at you. Stop it. Oh, I'm gonna murder this guy so hard right now. Oh, jeez, and that guy has a shotgun now? And now I should be able to kill him like this. There it is. So that actually gets to it, because I was enraged and wanted to murder that dude. Well, there are a range of motivations for why serial killers can choose to kill. Again, kind of refuting one of the common tropes or misunderstandings about serial killers is that they can't control what they're doing, or it's because they're insane. Not necessarily the case. There are quite a few serial killers out there that kill for almost what would be considered benign reasons, right? It can be out of anger, criminal enterprise, financial gain, ideology of some sort. It can be due to wanting to exercise power or the thrill of the kill as well. Sexual gratification is absolutely sometimes a motivator, as well as psychosis, or some sort of psychotic break. That can be one of the motives. And it fits into, each one of those motives fits into a various typology for serial killers. What's the most common one? The most common, because here's unfortunately one of the problems. These typologies and motivations for killing are usually determined after the fact by other people. And one of the reasons that is because the killer themselves is an unreliable source, right? There's this concept in literature, the unreliable narrator. Well, serial killers are absolutely unreliable narrators. You can't really necessarily trust every word they say. However, you can actually, because here's also another problem with typologies. Ask one psychologist or sociologist about the different typologies with serial murder, and each one of them will give you different answers. However, I'm going to break it down into two general categories that you can fit nearly every serial killer into. And that is either the organized serial killer or the disorganized serial killer. We're going to come back to these in a second, too. But let me pause. Let me while the game is kind of like in a lull right now, I'm going to bring out the book and talk about the organized versus disorganized serial killer, because it's actually really interesting. The organized serial killer fits more in line with that kind of stereotype that we have. Highly intelligent, masculine, charismatic, narcissistic, right? Mobile. The one that kind of fits in, right? This guy. If he wasn't covered in blood. Okay? This is the organized serial killer. Now, right now, he looks like a disorganized serial killer. And the way that he carried himself out earlier in the game would be more characteristic of a disorganized serial killer. The below average intelligence, socially immature, lacking in sexual capability, low education, kind of a loner, nocturnal, unskilled laborer, right? Low interest in media attention, maybe some alcohol or drug abuse prospects, right? This is kind of how you break, this is where you start, is organized or disorganized. And then you can kind of branch out from there. Now, of course, you're not going to find a serial killer that, not every single serial killer out there is going to fit neatly into those two categories. But you look through the traits that they have and you say, okay, does it sort of match one or the other? And then you can kind of, again, go out from there. What's this? I'm going to eat a mouse. And I stole that man's shillings. Oi, it'll be 10 shillings. Organized, disorganized serial killer, the two broad categories. And here's one of the issues, is that new typologies emerge every year. The longer we look at this, the more typologies emerge. So, that's where we start with this full topic, okay? But for the rest of tonight, what I would like to do is talk about kind of society's obsession with serial killers and, why? Why are we so interested? Why are all of you, right? So right now I'm going to look, how many viewers do I have? I have like a dozen viewers here. Why are you all here? Besides the fact that maybe some of you just kind of like me, which is cool. Or maybe some of you feel like you need to be here because you're in the class that I'm teaching. Or because maybe some of you are legitimately here because the topic interests you. But why, right? That's the question. Well, society does have kind of like a weird kind of sadistic interest in serial killers and the macabre and the occult and all of that. Well, funny enough, it's kind of in our cultural DNA, if you will. More shillings, 10 shillings. It's kind of in our cultural DNA. In the sense that, I mean, for as long as humans have been on the planet, right? Only recently, and when I say recently, I'm talking maybe within the past 100 or so years have we really started to understand how and why people do things, right? Whether they're good things or bad things. Here are some of the reasons I can't look away at a car wreck. I mean, yeah, it actually kind of goes right along with that, Yuri. We think about people back in this time, right? Or even earlier than this, because this is kind of turn of the century. But earlier than this, right? People were simple. People believed that, and now we are going to investigate a serial killer of our own. People believed that, the world was very simple. There was good and then there was bad. There were no shades of gray. And if you were good, it's because you were a God-fearing, civilized person. And if you were bad, it's because, the devil got to you, or, you were possessed, or it was the spirits or whatever, right? Well, that's because most of human history, people were stupid. People were real dumb. And in order to kind of like... Alright, so the blood... We need to follow the blood.
The smell is so strong.
The smell... So I can smell the blood. So, for people to try to understand, things that they couldn't understand, what did they do? Well, they created stories, is what they did. And anything from, to explain good people or bad people, right? Mental illness, disease, natural disasters, the creation of the world. People have tried to explain, how the world works. And one of those was, how could a person kill other people in such great numbers? And out of that fear or confusion came myths and monsters, right? One of which was the myth of the vampire. Think about a mythological monster, right? I'm gonna give you three of them: vampires, werewolves, and the Golem, which is actually Jewish folklore. But the monsters, vampires, werewolves, and golems, right? Not golem as in golem. We're talking about like golems, like made of stone. Vampires are the myths surrounding them. What are they? Let's see. They're usually very well dressed. They're usually very wealthy. They're charming. They're well educated. They are long-lived and talented and seductive and charismatic. I'm describing the organized serial killer, right? And then what do they do, right? If you're on their good side, they will invite you in and feed you dinner and treat you well, and then all of a sudden at night they turn and they drain the blood from, and it's always kind of portrayed as this like sexual thing, right? In fact, most of their victims are usually beautiful women, right? And then you have werewolves, right? And werewolves were not the polar opposite. They are they're usually blue collar types, right? Maybe kind of like the everyman, middle America, right? Just good old boys, right? Just some good old boys. Never meaning no harm. They live everyday lives. It's your next door neighbor, could be your best friend, could be your brother or sister. And, once a month they are overcome with this urge, where they literally transform into a monster and they go out and they murder, and they cannot control themselves whatsoever. And, they're ashamed of this curse that they have. That's the disorganized serial killer, right? Low intelligence, they doesn't connect well with others, the loner. That's werewolves are the disorganized serial killer. Actually, I can read, so before we go into the story, I can read to you the story. The Sony Bean family. Oh boy, these people were weird. This was back in 1600 AD, and they were labeled werewolves by the people who caught them. It was a family of people who lived in East Lothian near Edinburgh, Sony Bean, described as idle and vicious. They lived in a cave. The guy and his wife took shelter in the cave and began robbing and murdering unsuspecting travelers. To avoid detection, they murdered every person they robbed, and to satisfy their need for food, they resorted to cannibalism. Each time they killed someone, they carried him to their den, quartered the victim, salted the limbs, and dried them for later consumption. Like, these people were sick and twisted. They had kids, and then they had kids by those kids, and it ended up being like this feral family of people that would go out at night and kill travelers who were alone. Horrifying family. I mean, the werewolf label fits them pretty well, actually. But they were, again, it was a story created because it fit. They were like, who can possibly do this? Now, in today's day and age, we'd put them into a psych ward and study the shit out of them. But back then, they labeled them a monster and then they executed them. And then you have the Golem, right, which is Jewish folklore. And the folklore goes that it was a monster made of clay or dirt or stone or whatever that a shaman would create in order to execute a specific purpose. And once that purpose was done, it would like fall apart. But every once in a while, they would go wild. It's Frankenstein's monster. Frankenstein's monster was basically a retelling of the Golem folklore. And it's, again, this idea that the killer is made or created, which actually, again, does fit into a typology of serial killer, and this can be kind of like the psychotic one, right? The one that kills either due to psychosis or mental illness, or it can be a sociopathic one, which next week we'll talk about the differentiation between psychosis, psychopathy, and sociopathy. But that's a little much for tonight. So monsters fit right in with the whole serial killer. Oh, and perfect transition. Along with monsters, another great connection. The power of Christ compels you. Is it all holy symbols or just the cross that affects vampires? What do you think? Anywho, while you discuss that, cults and the occult and devil worship, something that has always been associated with serial killers as well. A cult can be defined a system of religious worship, devotion, or homage to a person or thing. The occult. Things that are kept secret, esoteric, mysterious, beyond the range of ordinary knowledge, involving the supernatural, mystical, and magical. I mean, really, both of those fit just like any religion. But specifically when we're talking about serial killers, when we think of cults and the occult, we're thinking about, devil worshippers and those that dress in the black hoods and dance around fires, or maybe witches, right? The scary things that scare the good genteel folk of society. When it comes to serial killers, though, right, there seems to be this like association. Help me. There seems to be this association with devil worship. But here's the thing: that's another myth. That's another misinformation that's thrown out there. That for some reason, serial killers are associated with devil worship. If there is, first of all, very few of serial killers out there actually can be linked to devil worship, right? So let's see, it's only about 5% of them. Again, only about 1 to 2% of all murders can be associated to a serial killer, and then only about 5% of those can be directly linked to some sort of devil worship. And even though in those cases the devil worship is self-stylized by the killer labels themselves as a devil worshiper. And then there's a couple theories that go with that are they linking the devil worship because they truly believe that the devil made them do it, or that they want to kill in the name of the devil or whatever deity a cult-like thing? Or is it because they're just throwing it out there because they like the media attention that it brings, right? Ted Bundy has been brought up a couple times in chat, but he's a really good example, not necessarily for devil worship, but for the fact that sometimes these killers, that once they're caught, they become sort of media darlings. And they'll say and do anything to kind of be in front of a camera. And there are some out there that have used not only the extreme descriptions of their crimes, to claims of mental illness, to claims of devil worship, in order to get that media attention, because it's in a way another means of controlling people. And that's usually, it's the serial killers that can be typed as the power control types that you see doing that sort of thing. But so is the devil worship actually a link, or is it something that, maybe the media has overreacted because, it sees a gruesome crime, can't make sense of it, and maybe we go right back to being these cavemen and these genteel folk who can't understand and start creating stories. And it's the devil that did it, because no sane person would ever choose to commit to these crimes. Or, right, is it the fact that we go right back to kind of our roots? We go right back to our roots of making up these stories, or is it because evil does truly exist, right? And to that, I pose to you certain individuals that commit these crimes knowing full well what they're doing, and not only accept it, but maybe enjoy it, or think that they are doing something correct, right? The best example I can give is Dr. Josef Mengele from Germany during World War II. He worked in... Can I steal stuff? I can steal his shillings. He worked with the Nazis in the... I can't remember if he was at Auschwitz. However, this is the story that kind of gives a quintessential story of who Josef Mengele was, right? If you worked at one of the camps, every individual who worked there had to work train duty. And train duty was when, as the people were coming in, were brought in from the undesirables, were brought in on the train, right? Because it wasn't just Jews, it was gypsies, it was homosexuals, it was, anybody that the Nazis had deemed to be deficient in some way. As the people came on the trains, everyone needed to do train duty, which was essentially sorting. As they came off the train, you would need to, right, look at the person and determine, can they work or no. If they worked, they went in one direction, and if they couldn't work, if they were weak, old, female, young, they would go in the other direction, and the other direction was straight to the gas chamber. Nobody liked doing that work except Josef Mengele. He would actively volunteer for it, even when it wasn't his shift. And not only would he volunteer for it, he would whistle while he did it. And he purposely liked doing it because he would look for children as they came off the train. And specifically, he would look for twins. And if he found a pair of twins, he would take them and he would invite them to stay with him, right, and treat them well, and then perform brutal experiments on these children, where he would take one twin and leave them alone, and take the other twin and do terrible things to them, because the twins you had a control and an experimental group. The problem was Josef Mengele was not that bright a guy. He would take fraternal twins as well as identical twins. So it's not like he wasn't even doing anything scientific at that point. He was just being a sick fuck is what he was doing. But he actively enjoyed that work. And when you hear stories like that, you have to think, does evil exist? And I think evil is on a spectrum, right? On one end, you have like Josef Mengele, right? And Hitler and all of those people who committed like these atrocities. And on the other end, you have like, I don't know, the people that created those bots that call you about like your car warranty being out of date or something like that. I don't know. Dr. Scott Peck spoke of these evil men, and he refers to them as people of the lie. He says they are constantly engaged in self-deception and the deception of others. But the deception isn't for the other's benefit. It is for their benefit. They lie to themselves in order to keep up what they're doing, because at no point can they admit what they are doing is wrong. And with that, I'm going to leave you with the question, does evil exist? As we continue to talk about serial killers, are we talking about just truly evil people? Or are we talking about, will we be talking about people? Is there a world in which these people may be given different circumstances, given different, even friend groups, right? Would they maybe have not become serial killers? Or when it comes to these people who do become serial killers, are they lost causes from the very beginning? We will continue talking about that topic next week when we get into the psychology of serial killers and the sociology of serial killers. So thank you again for joining me and watching this week on the Big Brain Relax and Learn. I hope you enjoyed it. If you do like this sort of content, please like, subscribe, and follow over on twitch.tv/FPScra. I perform these every Monday, 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Different game, different topic every week. Please join me next time, and I will see you then.